All right, welcome back in. Clay and Buck here, and our friend Miranda Devine in the mix with us once again. She is the author of Laptop from Hell and is a New York Post columnist. Miranda, great to have you on. Great to be with you again. You've been there from the beginning to the end here. You're like the alpha to omega of all things Hunter Biden. Here we are, certainly the end of, I guess, a book of the story, maybe the end of the story. But we're curious. Clay asked me this in the break. I didn't have a good answer unless it pertains maybe to the sentencing and when that was scheduled for. Why do you think Joe came out with this now?
Yeah, hi, Buck and Clay. Look, I think it's precisely because the sentencing for the gun felony charges in Delaware was coming up in 11 days, and then a few days after that was the sentencing on the gun conviction or guilty plea in California, the tax fraud. And so I think he wanted to get out ahead of that, probably because those convictions would have led to serious jail time. If you look at just the US sentencing guidelines, you would have seen, around 3 years is average for the tax fraud, especially if you have a prior conviction. And then on the gun felony, the average was about 16 months. So that was serious jail time. And I guess Joe Biden's trying to maintain this fiction that his boy did nothing wrong.
Well, we know he did a ton wrong, but before we dive into that more, Miranda, you and Buck hung out. Buck spoke at the New York Republican Club. You can tell me if I'm describing that. I heard it went fantastically well. How much fun did you guys have hanging out, and how did that overall go?
Yeah, no, we had a great time. Unfortunately, I missed that because I was having a Wagyu beef feast at Beach Cafe, and so I couldn't actually see Buck, but people were coming in after his speech and just raving about it and saying how wonderful he'd been. And so we caught up a couple of days later and had a terrific time.
That was great. Thank you, Miranda. It was good to get to meet you and your husband, Ron. Really enjoyed it. Now, I'm wondering, back to the Hunter Biden stuff here for a second. What do you think now happens with the rest of the Biden family? We've been getting this question too. I always forget the brothers. I mean, Joe's brother's name, but he was kind of in the mix with a lot of this stuff, right? And the 10% for the big guy and all this. Is it your expectation? I think we all expected Hunter was going to get pardoned at some point. Is it your expectation there could be additional pardons? And do you give any credence to he went back 10 years here to try to shut down investigation, not only of Hunter or prosecution, not only of Hunter, but any of his perhaps unnamed co-conspirators in some of this mess?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this pardon is not just about Hunter. It's a pardon for Joe himself because there's no other reason to go back 11 years. That is unprecedented in history. Nobody has ever given such an all-round, far-reaching pardon. Not even Nixon got one this long. 11 years. It's not 10 years. It's curious that it's 11. And why is that? So I look back at the timeline that I wrote up for the books, and that's 2014. So February 2014 was the Maidan Revolution. April of 2014, you have the Biden family swooping in and making the most of that very corrupt and war-torn country. And Hunter gets the $1 million a year gig on the board of this corrupt energy company, Burisma, the most corrupt company in Ukraine, which is saying something because it's the most corrupt country in Europe. And Joe Biden was implicated in all of that. And so by closing off any avenues for investigation, then he's sort of hiding his own role. And that's exactly the MO that we saw in that 5-year investigation into Hunter in Delaware, where every trail of evidence that led to Joe Biden, and there were a lot, was closed off. The IRS whistleblowers, investigators turned whistleblowers, told Congress that in sworn testimony that when For instance, they wanted to search a cottage on Joe Biden's property there in Wilmington or outside of Wilmington. They were denied, and they were never able to ask witnesses about the identity of the big guy, which was the code name that Hunter's business partners had to use to refer to Joe to cover up his involvement in the family influence peddling scheme. So all roads lead back to Joe. Hunter was the bag man. The big guy is the one who's protecting himself. He's not just being a kind father. And of course, his brother, Jim Biden, Joe's younger brother, Hunter's uncle, was very much involved in some of the later deals, the China deals, and got considerable amount of money. And he also is under investigation in sort of separate matters. So I'm sure that Joe Biden will wait until the traditional time when presidents issue pardons, the last day or two of his presidency in January, sort of 19 or 18, and issue a pardon for his brother. And no doubt there will be others involved in the scheme, whether they're family members, many family members. We know from James Comer's very good investigation of the money trail that there were, I think, something like a dozen different Biden family members who received money from these schemes, extracting millions of dollars from shady oligarchs in Ukraine and Romania and Kazakhstan, and from CCP officials in China. So maybe he'll want to issue a pardon to them. Although, some of them just received money. I guess they weren't to know where their father got it. But also there'd be other, I guess, partners of Hunter's. Like there's a guy called Rob Walker in Arkansas who was the conduit for a lot of this money, and then he parceled it out and funneled it out to Hunter and his family. So maybe he would also get a pardon, as much as anything to keep his mouth shut. But I think when it comes to people like Antony Blinken, who certainly assisted and met with Hunter and assisted in covering up the laptop before the 2020 election, if they received pardons, it's an admission of guilt from them if you accept a pardon. And so I'm not sure that they are going to want to admit guilt, because thus far they've been very good at keeping their hands clean and pretending they had nothing to do with it.
Miranda, you know better than anybody, and thank you so much for coming on the past several years with us and laying out just how many crimes Hunter had committed. Joe Biden is trying to make, in his statement last night, Hunter look like the victim of political attacks and overreaching prosecution. Based on everything you have written and everything you have seen of Hunter's alleged crimes and now convicted crimes, do you think Hunter received favorable or unfavorable treatment from the justice system?
Well, it's just hilarious. Of course, he got favorable treatment. And, Joe Biden's quite right. He was singled out for special treatment, and it was not what Joe is saying. He was, in fact, the Department of Justice bent over backwards to protect him and to make sure that the investigators never got to do what they wanted. Initially, the investigation into him was supposed to cover bribery and money laundering and foreign agent violations on top of the tax and the guns. This was a much bigger investigation with way more serious allegations. And the only reason that Hunter ended up being charged at all with any felonies was because of those brave IRS whistleblowers. This was the opposite of an unfair prosecution or an unfair investigation. What was unfair was what was done to the whistleblowers, and is still being done as they're being retaliated against by Joe Biden's administration.
Miranda, now that we look at this, and you were talking about all the different directions that the pardons in the future can go, and also sort of the entire timing of it, what comes next? What do you think Trump should do associated with the Hunter Biden crime family when he comes in? And I do think it's important, and we mentioned this earlier, But isn't it astounding that Trump has actually borne more political consequences for this simply by asking about what happened in Ukraine and getting impeached than anybody on the Biden crime family?
I know. I mean, isn't he just the perfect scapegoat? He was impeached for the sins of Joe Biden. Joe Biden was the one who actually did what Trump was impeached for. He withheld $1 billion in aid as a threat to ensure that the prosecutor who was investigating the company paying Hunter $1 million a year was fired, and he did get fired, and the new prosecutor dropped all the charges and the investigation against Burisma and the owner who was enriching the Bidens. So Donald Trump, his crime was to ask President Zelensky if he was going to do an investigation into the Bidens. And of course, that sent just alarm signals right through the deep state because they were complicit in covering up. And they knew that their role in that cover-up would come to the fore if the investigation into Joe Biden went ahead in Ukraine, and all their dirty business that has led now to this tragic war in Ukraine. So I think the number one priority for Trump is going to be, and you can see it with his installation of people like Kash Patel at the FBI, it's going to be to root out the wrongdoers in the deep state who covered up, who conspired to censor our stories about Hunter Biden, and that thus to basically rig the 2020 election to ensure that derogatory information about Joe Biden never got to the public, the voters, and just that included the CIA and the actual CIA director at the time, Gina Haspel, under Trump. She was involved in giving the green light to that dirty 51 letter, I call it, falsely claiming that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. We thought it was a whole bunch of retired intelligence officials. Turned out Gina Haspel herself allowed that to be published. It was put on her desk and she waved it through.
Miranda Devine, everybody. Miranda's got great books, including Laptop from Hell. Make sure you go look at her latest columns at NewYorkPost.com. Miranda, you've been on the story all along. Appreciate all your insight and analysis, and we'll be talking to you again soon.
Thanks so much.
Cyber criminals love this day, Cyber Monday, and that's because it's a day a lot of Americans, millions and millions of us, I'm one of them, going to be putting credit card info online to get these great deals, right? But during that online shopping frenzy, bogus emails with bogus websites more easily convince innocent individuals to share their online identity. That allows cyber criminals to do their stuff. You won't know about it for weeks often, and by then it's too late. It's important to understand how cybercrime and identity theft are affecting our lives. Look, I just got a notification, Clay, a couple of days ago. Somebody stole my credit card trying to go on a big shopping spree. Big time of year for this, but it got caught by my friends at LifeLock. Friends, got to go check out what they're doing. LifeLock, sign up today if you haven't already. LifeLock detects and alerts you to potential identity threats you may not spot on your own, like crimes committed by thieves pretending to be you. If you do become a victim of identity theft, a dedicated U.S.-based restoration specialist will work to fix it. It's easy to help protect yourself with LifeLock. Join now. Save 25% off your first year with my name, Buck, as your promo code. Call 1-800-LifeLock or go online to lifelock.com and use promo code BUCK for 25% off.